Good morning, everybody. My name is Memo Doring, and I am your friendly neighborhood Alexa evangelist. And today, we're going to be doing something that we like to call the monthly release webinar. So, the way that this works, as of last month, is we get together once a month and we talk about the recent releases that happened for the Alexa platform in the last month and the stuff that we're excited about, the one we want you to know about. So that's what we're doing today. I'm monitoring Twitch chat, so if you have any questions, just let me know there. We're going to go pretty quick here because we got 5 features to cover. We're going to recap, or we're going to use some of the features that we talked about last month. So I'll mention those as I go. But if you want to keep, and I'm going to share a bunch of links so you can go investigate a little bit more, because obviously I won't be able to go in depth or build a skill for every single feature in the time that we have allotted today. But what we can do is share more information about it so you can learn as much as you want. So the first thing I wanted to show you or share with you is a short link, which is alexa.design/parody. I don't know how to spell parody. And if you're on Twitch chat, you should be able to see that. And that's a super helpful page that we maintain. And what it does is, and let me share my screen with you. What this page does is it shows all the recent announcements that the team has had with the date that they're in short summary, but something that's really cool is also what the availability is. So for our international developers, obviously we love you and we want you to build cool skills as well. So making sure that we have this in as many locales for each launch as we can is important for us. So we want to tag those as they become available. And then if there's a blog or the documentation. So this is a really, really good place to just kind of keep updated on what's coming. And then obviously we're doing these launches and we have the blog, and we share information on our social channels like Twitch and Twitter and Facebook. So just something to keep an eye on for that. So the question is the webinar starting soon? And I thought we did. Can you not see me? Because I see everything going on my side. And I'm pretty sure I could see myself on Twitch. But now you're making me second guess. So I don't want to be talking here to myself. So let me just check that real quick. Yeah, it shows live. All right, cool. Just had a brief panic attack there. Good morning. So yeah, the webinar started a few minutes ago, and I wasn't talking to myself. So great. So the features that we're going to talk about today is you can basically see everything that was launched in February here. So we're going to talk about those. APL voice selection and video transfer controls, baby skill API, international slots, blueprint publishing, catalog value suggestions, and intent chaining. And I'm going to talk about each of those individually in a second. So I'm going to start with my favorite. I'm sorry, I'm picking favorites. They're not all equal in my heart. Each of us will have their favorite. So my favorite is the catalog value suggestions. So I'm going to build a skill real quick to show you what that is, because it's really, really, really cool. So I'm going to call this one catalog value, and I'm going to do that as a self-hosted skill, and I'm going to start from scratch, and it's here. I'm really not even going to finish this skill. I just want to build a voice model for it, and just to show you. So what I'm going to do, and the way you can use catalog of value suggestions is when you have an intent that has slots in it. So I'm going to make an intent that is blanking out here. I'm going to go with a classic, a color intent. So what the sample utterances will be, we're going to be asking the user for their favorite color, I guess. So this will be so my favorite color is, and then a slot for color. And then, and we're going to use a custom slot so we can show the behavior that we want, or as much as we can. And then our favorite color, color is, and that's good enough for our demo purposes right now. So basically just have a little slot there, and then the slot, we're going to say we want to add a new slot type, and we're going to create our own custom slot, and it's going to be called list of colors. And I want to create that custom slot type, and I'm going to start adding values here. And one's going to be green, and then we're going to have red. And then as soon as I did that, you'll see that all these boxes popped up, and this is a new feature. And this is super cool. So based on at least one value right now, it's suggesting other values. So I can add it as I can start adding things here. So it's suggesting things that I might want there. So I'm adding all of these. I added blue, yellow, red, just using these values that it's suggesting. But you can also add them as synonyms. So I can say, okay, bright red, or rather dark blue, I want to add as a synonym to blue. And it added it here. So it's helping me build my synonyms, my slots, the values, the training data for my slot, so I can capture input from the user in a very intuitive way. So this is really helping me find that data or suggesting data. Doesn't mean that you should only use this data, but it's going to help. So you could say, oh, I don't see it here, but what about emerald? Technically a shade of green, I guess. So I'm going to add it as a synonym here, emerald. It's not it wasn't necessarily on my list, but I was missing purple from my values, so I'm going to add that. So this is going to help me build my synonyms. The model suggesting things, so pink, again, value, light blue. I don't want to make distinctions between light and dark, so I'm going to just throw as a synonym to blue. And then I could work with the data and do different things. Obviously, there might be values here that you don't want, like red, yellow. To me, doesn't mean anything. But red, yellow, like if you combine them, you probably get orange. So I'm going to add as a synonym to orange. And sky blue, I would add as a synonym to blue in my case. But you can make it as granular as you want. But then I would say like green, yellow. That doesn't really mean anything to me, so I'm just going to remove that from my list. Purple, red. So you'll see this is based on like statistic and trying to figure things out for you and suggest things for you. But it doesn't, it's not a be-all, end-all. But you can get really good suggestions like, oh, just the two words like blue, green. But you could also have yellow and green, the word and in there. So definitely really interesting and what it can help. And this doesn't just work for color, so it would work for whatever else. So let me see if we can do that. So let's just save that and save the model. Why? Oh, okay. So can't save the model because I haven't assigned list of colors to my intent or my slot type. So now it's saved, and what I'm going to do is add another thing that'll be I don't know, I'm in our Twitch studio, so I'm going to say list of equipment. So I could do camera, and then the lights, and the monitor, and then monitor and cables. and then it'll suggest other things, right? So video cameras, LEDs, ambient light, sensors, microphones. So microphone, definitely, we have one right here. So like I said, this is super, super cool. I love it. I think it's a great feature. The more we can train data to help us understand the users in a better way, the better our skills are going to perform. So this is a great way of doing that. So I'm big fan of this. I wanted to throw a shout out to this little button up here, which is an utterance profiler. So you can say things like, oh, I got to build my model first. So let's build a model and wait for it. I want to show utterance profiler, even though it's a feature from last month. I'm going to just talk about it for maybe 10 seconds, and then we'll move on. If you have any questions, by all means, I'm keeping an eye on Twitch chat. And let me know how if the audio is coming out fine, if it's too loud, if it's not too loud enough, I'll try to get that as well. Yeah, I agree, Punk Poco. It's very nice. This is really cool. So I'm going to do utterance profiler now that my skill builder is done, or my skill is done building, and I'm going to just type something in here and say, I like green, and see what happens. So what this does is it triggered a fallback intent, so it didn't really match to anything, but it also had other considered intents, which were the color intents and the color with a slot of color green. So we don't have enough training data for this to perform well, but this little tool helps us debug and like, oh, this utterance isn't actually mapping to the place I wanted to. So just like the suggestions from this catalog, we can use utterance profiler to improve our utterances for our intent. So I could add I like and then color here to make sure that utterance behaves the way I wanted to. And then I would save that and build my model. Oop, I guess I gotta actually add it. Save that and then build my model. And that would perform better. So the whole thing here for these two tools is to continue to always improve our interaction model so it's performing as well as we can. So I'm going to leave that for now. That's the first feature of the day. So if we're going down this list, we've talked about the catalog value suggestions, and if you want to look at the documentation, you can look at that for now. And from the list, you can see that it's available in all EN, also all English language models, Canada, Australia, UK, India. I'm missing one. I'll go check. So if you want to look at what the models are available, you can see over here on the top left corner, click on language settings, and you can click add new language, and you can see all the different language models. So English for Australia, English for Canada, English for India, English for the UK. Oh, English for the US was the fifth one I was missing, but that was the one I was already using. So it'll be available for all those English models. Obviously, we want to maintain parity as we move forward, so we hope that this is available in other languages soon. Can't really talk about dates specifically, but super excited, really cool feature to check out. So let's, and I'm going to put a link to the custom, this is not the one I wanted. Catalog value suggestions. Well, I guess it is here. Let me see if I can find the direct link. Yeah, suggested slot values. So I'm going to put a link in chat for that specifically. Okay. So PN Brew 253, are you able to say which languages are getting worked on? Not really. I'm not privy to the roadmap for the team. But like I said earlier, the goal is for features to be worldwide as quickly as we can. So hopefully this will roll out to all the rest of the language models shortly. And you can find more information here a little bit. Another example, I think what they're doing is activity. So you can get additional context, if you may, from the documentation here. So the next one that we're going to talk about is the baby skills API. So for that, I'm gonna have to go all the way back to my skills and click on create skill, and it logged me out. No, it didn't log me out. I don't know what that was. So you'll see here that after you give it asks for a name and the default language, you can select different types of skills. There's custom, there's flash briefing, there's smart home, music, video, and recently we added the baby activity skill. And this is a very particular it's a very particular type of skill. It's purpose built for something which is people or companies or developers that are already working on an app or a web app of some sort that is for new parents or families with babies that they want to log activities. And this will provide a way of putting data into those apps. That is the use case. It's not just a general skill for anyone. And as you'll notice, once I select that, it doesn't even give me to do the ability to do a hosted skill. So it's got its own way of working. So I'm going to just click here on create skill. And the first thing it would ask me for is where's the service endpoint? So where's the Lambda that's going to handle this? I'm not going to go ahead and build it. I'm just going to talk through this one right now. But it requires account linking. You have to do account linking because, like I said, this is built for people that are already working or have something that's working for different, be it an app or different scenarios for babies. And this is just an additional way of funneling information into that. So a good example of that is you're changing your baby's diaper. You can just say, Alexa, Alexa, record a diaper change, and that could have a timestamp and all these different things. The language model is already built. You don't have to do anything for the language model. You get that for free, and then using account linking, it'll know what user said that, how to log it, and then you can surface that through the app or the web app that you're using. So it's all kind of just made to capture that type of data. There's a few different things to keep in mind there. There's three basic things that you can look at. One is adding data, the other one is reading data, and the last one is timers. So you could ask, when was the last time the name of your baby had a meal or had a bottle? And then you're reading data. Or you can say, hey, record feeding right now. And that could work like as a timer, and you could say, okay, she fed for this amount of time. So you can write data, you can read data, and you can also set some timers. And that's basically how it works. It's not just a custom skill. It's not an open-ended API. It's very, very targeted. If you want to learn more about this, if you're building skills or apps for that audience, I would recommend you take a quick look at the documentation, and I'll share a link to that right now. So there's a question here from Red China. Can we use baby tracking API for pet tracking? Can you specify any activity like changing a pee pad or taking them for a walk? Not right now. It's very, very targeted for babies right now. So you'll notice it'll have like weight, sleep, diaper change, and infant feeding. And the language model is built for you, so you really can't deviate from it. This is just for babies right now, so you'll see some of the sentences here, but it's very, very focused on that. So track weight of 20 pounds, log a bottle feeding of 6 ounces for Jane, what is the baby weight, that kind of thing. That's all already in there, and it's already couched in these 4 categories: weight, sleep, diaper change, and infant feeding. There's another question here. Do you provide the Lambda to go with the baby activity skill? No, we don't provide the Lambda. You have to write your own Lambda. This is, like I said, for someone that's already building apps for babies. This is not a consumer-facing thing where if you have a newborn at home, you would just turn this on. This is something for someone that's already building an app for baby tracking or baby activity tracking, and they want to integrate with a voice piece to that. So there's a few that we mentioned in our launch vlog for those companies that are already working with this, like a Baby Connect and Wildflower Health. So it's that kind of thing where they those companies can now take data from voice and include it as part of the suite of what they're already doing. But if you have a baby at home, maybe one of these two apps can help you. So feature number 2, and then the third one we're going to talk about is for our international crew out there, and this is expanded support for slots in international locales. So let's go back to our skills over here. And we had this catalog value one that we used for a minute, that we made a minute ago. And if you joined us late or anything like that and you want to catch what I said earlier, this will be available as a recording on Twitch. So if you go to twitch.tv/Amazon Alexa, there'll be a video section up top. You can see all our recordings there. We try to keep them for as long as we can, as long as they're relevant. So if you want to go in there or pause or whatever, if I'm going a little too fast, you can do that there. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to add a new language model to this. I speak Spanish. I'm originally from Mexico, so I'm going to go with a Spanish MX language model that I'm going to add to this. And then I'm going to go back here to custom, and each language that we add will have its own language model, its own invocation name. So for this one, catalog value is not something that you could easily say in Spanish. So because I want to demo something else, I'm just piggybacking on this skill. What I'm going to do is say, got to make sure that I'm in the MX one, not editing the other one. I'm going to call this one libros y películas, which it means books and movies, or actually books and books and characters. Libros y personajes. So that's books and characters. I'm going to click save. And the reason I'm not going to do books and movies is because just for this demo, I don't want to have to go into the disambiguation. If someone says The Lord of the Rings, do they mean the book? Do they mean the movie? So I'd rather show two different types of slots in action real quick. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of capturing someone's favorite color, I'm going to capture their favorite book. So I'm going to have a book intent, and I'm going to create a custom intent. And instead of doing what I did earlier, which is create a custom slot type, I'm going to use a built-in slot type, which wasn't available before in Spanish. It might have been available before in English, but I wanted just to show it real quick in Spanish. So I'm just saying my favorite book is, and then book, and I'm going to have one with two slots in there. And I'm using a US keyboard, so I'm not doing any accents, which is a bad thing to be doing. So the second one is, oops, square bracket doesn't belong there. The second one is, this is my favorite character from this book. And now for the slot types, I can select here. You'll see there's a bunch of different ones, and each of these is going to be dependent on the locale that I'm building for. So these are the ones that are available for ESMX, which is quite a few of them. So I'm looking for book. Even though the name is in English, the name is shared, but the training data is tailored to each one of the locales. So the one in German will be for movies in German and the names that they use in Germany, and so on and so forth. So the other one that I'm going to do is fictional character. So I got those two, and then save that, and then I'm going to build it, and I'm going to use utterance profiler, kind of go back to that to just see how it's mapping. Again, this is not pointing to anything. It doesn't have any backend, any code associated to it, but I can test my UI, my voice UI, with just utterance profiler, which is really, really, really cool. And I don't see any questions on Twitch, but like I said, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit here. If you have any questions, just stop me, ask them. Happy to provide any answers there for the features that I'm going for, or how they might relate to stuff that you're building, or how different features can be combined. I'm already kind of hammering on utterance profiler pretty hard, which was the launch last month, because I just think it's so cool, and it helps me test, and it also allows me to show you things really, really quickly without having to build out a whole skill. So I could say, mi personaje favorito es Gandalf de El Señor. I need to end with a tilde. So I'm not doing any accents, so this will be weird, but you will see that we got a book intent with slots libro, which is book, for El Señor de los Anillos, the Lord of the Rings, and then the character is Gandalf. So you could do something like that. We could try another one. I don't know. I'm blanking on books. I wanted to do something for Harry Potter. Oh, there we go. Dumbledore. I guess if I do Harry Potter, it should work. Maybe it's technically not a book because it's a series. So yeah, but it still worked, right? So it said book Harry Potter, character Dumbledore. So we're using this data that's already pre-built, so it's behaving the way I wanted. And the other nice thing about the utterance profiler is it's giving me other options that could be here, like that it didn't actually map to, but it thought the statistical model thought could be relevant. So those built-in custom slots are now available in 11 more languages. It's not just those two that I showed you. There's a bunch of them, and like I said, they're trained to behave correctly for each of the language models. So that's something that's really, really useful, that you should be taking advantage of. One thing to keep in mind is what I said earlier is if you have training date or slots where you have movies and books, there might be some overlap with the training data, so you might have to do some disambiguation with your user if you're collecting. If someone is saying like, "Oh, my favorite book is The Lord of the Rings," make sure that you're capturing it as a book and not as a movie, so just the data is consistent. So you could do that with confirmation and say like, "Oh, I heard your favorite book is The Lord of the Rings. Is that correct?" And that would be like an explicit confirmation, which is adds a little bit of friction, but make sure that you're hearing exactly what you want. And obviously, for something like this, just a demo, it doesn't make a ton of sense to add friction, but depends on what you're doing. Okay, so that's the third feature that we're going to cover today. And then we have another feature, or two features that we're going to talk about that are for the Alexa presentation language. And we're going to take a little bit more time to talk about at least the first one of these. And it's the Alexa presentation language is a new way of showing rich graphical interfaces on the devices that have a display on them. So one new thing that we just announced this month is a new layout, and this layout is called the transport controls layout. And what this allows you to do is to show transport controls on the screen in a very predictable manner. So you can import the Alexa layout, and then you can give it some specifications for what you want your primary controls and your secondary controls to look like, and if you want it to autoplay or whatnot, and it'll render that on the screen for the media that you're trying to show. And here's an example of one that's been built out. It's got the URL and all these different things for the media that we want to play. So what I went ahead and did is I reached out to some of the other evangelists, and especially Cami Williams. So shout out to Cami, and she helped me build out a little sample that I could show to you today. So I made this sample called Transport Control. This would not pass certification at all. This is just a tech demo. It's not a fully featured skill. It just does one little thing, and that's it. But we're going to look at the code for it, and we're going to look at the dependencies on the transport layer controls in there as well. So what we're going to look at right here is I just used the language model for the Hello World intent, and I hosted my skill in the Alexa hosted. So if you haven't seen that, it's also really cool. We launched it last month. So I'll talk about that in a second. But the one here, the thing that I wanted to show you was it working before. So just show you what we're going to build, and then we'll go into how I built it. So I'm going to change this to a large hub. And then down here, if you haven't used this before, if you're using the Alexa presentation language, you can choose what device it's getting rendered down here on to get an idea of how that's working. Small caveat, the Alexa presentation language is still in beta, so there's a chance that this might not look exactly like you want it, so just kind of wanted to let you know. If you get a warning here that says upgrade to the Alexa presentation language when you're trying to do a test, that means you haven't turned the interface on, so I'll show you how to do that next when we're going into how I built this. So I made this skill, and it's just going to be called Transport Control. And you need to know how to type open transport control. So we shouldn't be getting this error. Weird. So I'll fix it if that's an actual error. Let me just try something. There we go. So that error was a bug. But what it does is it shows me this video of someone making a gin and tonic, I believe. And it's got the controls for me right here. So I could click on them and pause the video, or play the video, or go back, or go to the so I can control the video by doing this. I have the controls, and you could tap on the device, and I can define how they look and where what controls I have on there. So that's basically what this layout for the Alexa presentation language allows me to do. And I'm going to stop with the gin and tonic on screen. So really cool. We just took a little bit, like a little clip from someone. This is not something that we own. It's just for demo purposes. So let's go into how I built it. The first thing that you have to do if you want to take advantage of the Alexa presentation language is you have to have the interface for it turned on. So I went back to the build section for this specific skill, and then clicked on interfaces over here on the left hand side. And you'll notice there's quite a few interfaces that I could turn on. There's display interfaces, video, gadget, can fulfill intent request, and Alexa presentation language. And you'll see that I've got Alexa presentation language turned on. You need to do that. This is a requirement. You have to do it. There's no way around it if you want to take advantage of the Alexa presentation language. So once you've done that, you're going to have to write some code. If you want to take advantage of the Alexa hosted skills new feature, which is real cool. You'll have a code tab in your developer portal, so you don't have to have a separate Lambda. You can use this for hosting your code. If you want to see an explanation of that, I'm kind of pressed for time, so I don't want to take too much of a tangent, but we talked about it in the roundup for last month, and I can post a link to the blog, I think, in a minute. But basically, you're hosting your code in a shared account that the Alexa team provides that does a bunch of different things, but it's less than the full complete feature set of a full AWS account. And I'm sorry if I'm saying a lot, but I'm pivoting all over the place, saying a bunch of different things. I apologize for that greatly, and beg for your mercy. I am missing. So what we're going to do here is have our code. The first thing I do is have const Alexa require ASK SDK core. So I'm importing in the Alexa SDK, and then I just have two handlers. I have one for the launch request, and the launch request is very, very basic. What it's doing is just saying, sending a message back. That's it, nothing else. And then the second one, what it's doing is request handler for every intent. And I'm doing it this way because, again, that's a tech demo. It's not supposed to work in the real world. Every intent that comes in is going to get the same response. And because I didn't want to spend too much time doing that, I also have a helper function for supports APL, so I can distinguish between a device that can do APL and a device that can't do APL. And I have an error handler just for logging, so when I was hacking, I wouldn't have to wonder what was happening, and I could just get a nice console log with all the error information. And then I have two interceptors, one interceptor for logging the request that's coming in, one interceptor for the response that's going out, all very, very simple. And finally, I have my skill builder. So the real meat of this is here. And what it's doing is I have a current state variable, and I'm going to check if it's play or pause, and depending if it's true, I'm going to set it to false, and the other way around, so I can play and pause the video. But you'll look here if it's checking if it supports APL. If it supports APL, it'll send this response right here, and if it doesn't, it'll just say something. So if I'm on a device that doesn't have a screen or that doesn't support the Alexa presentation language, I will not send a directive with all the presentation language, because it would just not render. It would probably throw an error on the device. It wouldn't be great. So I want to have that behavior for the two different types of devices. And the second one is when you actually have a screen on there. So the first one is the one that we really care about. So we're saying, okay, we're going to have a simple card that'll go to the user's alexa.amazon.com webpage or their Alexa app on their phone. And then we have a directive. And the directive is a type of presentation, Alexa presentation APL render document. And then we're going to have a token, which is a video player token that we can use to link everything together. And finally, we have a document. And the document is really what's defining what we're going to be seeing on the screen. And we're also going to add a separate directive, which is the commands that we want on there, the control media from my video player. And so let's look at the document that's actually defining what's happening here. And this document is where we're importing that transport control. So here we're saying we want to import the transport controls. Here's the import command, and we're saying we want to import the Alexa layouts, But once we've imported all the layouts, we want to say the one we really want to use is the Alexa transport controls. And here we're defining where that video that you saw lives, the type that it is, the name of the video, and also the size that we want to give it. And then we also have a set state with immediate components for toggling the buttons, and it'll show if it's checked or not checked. But we can really control the size of the things that we want to see, the color that we want to do there. So we can change this. And I guess if I just start fiddling around with this color, we might see something. It will be unexpected because I'm not really know what I'm doing. I just changed 42 to FF, and let's see what happens. I'll go back and test it just to see if my color looks okay. I did not test that yesterday, so apologies if it's a horrible color. Transport control. Again with the typos. Open transport port control. And oh man, I want to do the big hub, large hub. So that'll reset the whole thing. Just to make it clear, let me do this, exit, and then copy that. I'm gonna refresh this page so it's extra clear what I'm doing because I screwed up at the top. So I'm changing it to the large hub, go proceed, and then I'm gonna say open transport control, which is the invocation name of my skill. It'll give me that little response that I got there. And then if I say hello, it'll trigger an intent, and that intent, I'll have this. And didn't change my background color. Oh, you know what? I screwed up. So I say a lot. I've made typos, and I also forgot to save. So I hit the trifecta. I saved my document, but I didn't hit deploy. So once I hit deploy is when it's actually going to push it. So I got to wait for the deployment to finish, which is an extra step that is brought in by the using Alexa hosted. But it's a worthwhile trade-off if you don't want to have your own AWS account and put your credit card in there and do all that's required. You have hosted, which is a really cool thing. So we have, I'm just going to do the whole flow again, change this to a large hub, and then open transport control. And I could have just had that response come up in the launch request, but I didn't because I wanted to show you an intent kind of firing off. And now we get this horrible pink, but I changed the background because it's all based on that document that I created. Obviously, you would need a different intent that handles the user saying pause, stop, next, whatever. And I don't have that right now. But you can see our different APL samples on our GitHub repo. To do that, let me just share the information about the transport control layout in a chat really quick. And one more thing, so we're really tight for time right now. So the other thing that I wanted to show you, and I won't be able to get to a demo of this, but is it's item selection. So let's say that you're showing a number of items on screen using the Alexa presentation language. You'll have the Amazon Select intent that'll be added to your model. And what that really helps you with now is using ordinal and anaphora-based selections. And what ordinal and anaphora-based selections allow you to do is say things like select the third one. And if the user says select the third one, you would get a Amazon Select intent triggered with a value of 3 in the object, but you would also get the ID for the item that was selected. So if you're going to make an API request or you're going to check your database based on the item that the user selected, you will also get that ID, so you don't have to maintain some sort of logic to say what is on screen rendering right now in the third position, so you can then later transform that into an ID that you can actually work with. You'll get that all in the object, which is really, really handy and super, super helpful. And anaphora might sound like a fancy word, but what we typically refer to anaphora is saying things like select this, select that, instead of being more specific with the positioning. You can just say whatever. Select this one, select that one, select the next one is what we want to do. And basically, the reason we have that in there is we want to allow users to speak in a very candid way. We want them to be able to say what they would say naturally to any person if they were shopping at a store and they wanted to say, oh, can you show me the third one from the back? Or if you're at the ice cream parlor, you can say, I want this one. So without having to touch it necessarily, but saying whatever is in front of me, whatever I'm seeing right now, that's what anaphora helps with. So you can do a voice-based selection using either of those two, and it's really handy. It allows users to interact in the correct way, or the way we define as our preferred way. You got to remember that even though you have a screen that the user might be looking at, there's no guarantee that they are looking at it. So I like to joke that most skills, or all skills, should pass the couch test. So if I'm sitting on the couch and you tell me get up and touch the screen of your device, it's not passing the couch test. I should be able to do everything from my couch, even without looking at the device. In my case, my couch is perpendicular to the screen of my device, so I don't necessarily see it. I might have to crane my neck, which might be fine, but I don't want to get up, take the dog off my lap, get up, and go touch something. It might be too slow. So I want to be able to interact with it the whole way, just using my voice. I might be looking at it from across the room and say, select the third one, I want the first one, show me more, that kind of thing. Same thing for the videos. Play the video, pause the video. If I'm cooking and it's showing me how to make this gin and tonic, and now I have a bunch of lime juice on my hands, I probably don't want to touch the screen, so I want to say pause, play, as well as be able to touch it. So you can do all that, and unfortunately, we have so many features that we can't really show every single detail in action. There's one more really cool feature that I'm going to show you. I saved this one for last because I thought I might run out of time, but my colleague Justin Jeffers wrote a really good blog post about it, but I'm going to break it down and kind of explain it to you because it's got a weird name. And this last feature is called intent chaining. So I'm going to share a few links with you. So the first one is a blog post that my colleague Justin Jeffers wrote. And then the second one is the documentation for intent chaining, where, for transfer control, sorry, before I pivot out of that, there's also a design guide that you can now check in our developer design guide, best practices and how to use it, additional resources. So it's really good. I think someone in chat mentioned touch wrappers. Yeah, tech stuff. So we won't get to touch wrappers, but there's the touch wrapper limitations documentation here. In general, don't make your buttons so small that people can't touch them. Like, it's not like a mobile phone where you're holding it and you're using your thumbs. You want your touch area to be pretty big, but you can, if you want to learn how to use touch wrappers, here's a design guide documentation, which is really helpful. So I'm just gonna send that and tag you there, tech stuff. And so now finally pivoting off of that, we're gonna talk about intent chaining and what intent chaining does. And I think I closed the doc for the tab for the docs, but I've got my little handy list there, so I could just go to the chain. Here we go. So it's basically it allows you to do is to pass in a new intent to trigger a dialogue. So if you're not an Alexa skill expert, that might sound very esoteric. What it means is, and I'm going to describe the example that's in the docs. Let's say you're booking a flight. You have a skill that helps you book trips, and you are done booking your flight. You can then immediately move the user to start booking their car without having to have an extra step. So I could just say, Alexa, start my trip planning skill, and it could, instead of having to say, welcome to the trips planning skill, do you want to start planning your trip? It could immediately say, okay, where do you want to go? So it's now in a dialogue, and I can say, Portland. All right, where are you at? Oh, I'm in Seattle. So it immediately it can immediately chain from a launch request into a dialogue. And once it's done with a dialogue, it can chain into a different intent to start a different dialogue. So it can go from the flight booking dialogue to the car booking dialogue to the hotel booking dialogue if we want to chain them like that. And we can do that programmatically. What you do is basically set the updated intent value when you're starting that dialogue to the new intent that you want to trigger. So even though the user didn't necessarily reference a specific intent, you can direct them that way and start the dialogue. You have to have a dialogue model associated to your skill for this to work. Dialogue model is just a fancy way of saying that your skill has a slot or intent that is required. So let me see. One of these had it. I'm pretty sure this is it. But if you have a slot, nope, this wasn't it. If you have a slot, you mark it as required, and that'll make sure that the skill has a dialogue associated to it. It knows how to fill it. So in my case back here, I'm going to change it to English so it's obvious for everybody that's watching. I can go to the color intent, and then I can say, okay, this slot requires filling. So we need that slot to be filled for us to actually work with that intent. So I'm going to need to add prompts for the user. So what is your favorite color? So this is half of the dialogue. What is Alexa asking the user so they can fill the slot? And then the second part is the user utterance, and they would basically, they could answer with just the name of the color that they like. So now I've got this dialogue model in there. I can use intent chaining when the user says, Alexa, open, what do we call this one? Catalog value. I can, from the launch request, trigger this intent, this color intent, and it'll go straight into the dialogue because the slot won't be filled. We'll trigger right into the dialogue, and it'll just say, what's your favorite color? And I'll say green. And then it could go from there and ask me, what's your favorite meal? And I can say tacos. And we can go from there. So all of this is going to allows us to have a lot of versatility for how we're directing the dialogues. I really like the example that Justin used in his skill, or in his blog post rather. So if you look at it, he built it all around, or the concepts all around a coffee shop. So you have the customer saying, Alexa, open coffee shop, and it'll say, welcome to the coffee shop, start my order. That's the old way of doing it, or the basic way of doing it. You could also just say, Alexa, open coffee shop, and instead of saying, welcome to the coffee shop, and then asking a question, you could just say, which would you like, tea or coffee? So you're immediately asking the questions that you want. They're within your dialogue model. They have the right training data. It's not just an open-ended question. It's going to be filled with really high accuracy. So intent chaining is really, really cool. Something to keep an eye out for. You can chain from any intent, including a launch request. You just can't chain to a launch request because launch requests are just meant to be the starting point. Let me make sure that I'm not missing anything from my list. Oh, you can also set a confirmation and slot values as part of your chaining. So what you can do is send a response back that includes the confirmation status and slots. So when I was going back to the other example, when I'm filling my flight status, I might want to pass my destination city into my car booking dialogue, so I don't have to ask the user twice. So where are you going? I'm going to Portland. Okay, where are you flying from? I'm flying from Seattle. Great, you're flying on Delta, blah, blah, blah. You're landing at such and such time. Do you want to book a car? Yes. Okay, what company do you want to book your car in Portland? Because it already knows I'm going to Portland, so I can pass that extra information instead of asking the user, where are you going, or where do you want to book this car? If the user might say, no, I don't want to book the car in Portland. I want to book it 2 days later in California and San Francisco. And they should be able to do that, but you can ask less questions by passing in slot values. You can also pass in the confirmation status, and what the confirmation status allows you to do is, if you already confirmed with the user, if you added that extra friction to say, hey, I heard you're going to Portland, maintain that context that the user already said, yes, I'm going to Portland, so you're 100% certain instead of not continuing that. So there's Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon, so you might want to disambiguate that. Hey, I heard you're going to Portland, Oregon, is that right? Yes, confirmed. So then I'll pass in the confirmation status to the next intent, so we know we're really sure with that, and it wouldn't trigger my logic to disambiguate again. That is time. There's a few questions. I'll take those. I gotta run right after that. Absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Absolute pleasure doing a quick roundup of the new features that are coming out. Let us know if you have any other questions. If you don't like this format, if you like this format, if you don't like me, it's all fair game. Just let us know. You can find us on Twitter at AlexaDevs. You can also find us on Facebook. All feedback is welcome. We'd love to hear from the community. So just let us know how can we serve you better. That's what we're here for. If you want to find me personally, you can find me at Memodoring, MEMODORING on Twitter. Happy to chat. Happy to. My DMs are open if you have any questions, and I'm always answering technical questions on there. So there's a question here from Hawthorne NEIX. What's the advantage compared to something like return other intent handler, handler input? SDK had intent chaining, but I've been using the other approach in SDK v2. So intent, the v1 of the SDK was just about intent names, so you couldn't really key off any other values. So there was a hacky way of emitting a new event within the SDK to trigger a different intent. What this does is just for the dialogue model. So it goes straight into the dialogue model. So if you have an intent that has slot confirmation or elicitation, you can trigger that immediately with this. And that's what this is for, to go right into the dialogue, not just triggering the new intent. You are using example of launch intent. Does this mean that the launch intent is never really reached? The launch intent is reached, and that's a great question, because you even have the option to, on top of the updated intent, you still can do output speech. So let's say you hit the launch request, you have a piece of text that you want to say, and then you want to go into the dialogue, you can set that output speech, and it'll say, welcome to the coffee shop, and then go into the dialogue. So it's still hitting your launch request. If the user gave you a one-shot invocation that actually didn't land in your launch request, they would hear a different message, maybe not the welcome piece. So you can tailor that response because you know exactly where it's going through, and but just direct them to the dialogue. So you can tailor that behavior. And this is from PNW Brew 253, just as a last one, and which is, would it be useful to use if the user says something unexpected and the request is Amazon fallback, direct them back to the intent you were having them dialogue in? That might be confusing. So if it didn't match to anything and you just drop them into a specific dialogue, because the dialogue is going to assume that you have fairly certain or fairly high certainty that this is what the user is trying to say. So the fallback intent should be used to disambiguate. Like, I didn't really understand that. We have a skill that's called Dev Tips that gives you information about building Alexa skills, and we noticed a lot of people were asking just random questions like pizza and about bananas, and like just kind of trip us up. So that's the kind of stuff that our fallback intent would grab, and we'd say like, hey, I'm sorry, I really don't know anything about pizza, but if you want to learn how to build dialogue directives, just a dialogue directive to learn more. And we're trying to guide them to what we do know from the fallback intent. All right, so I'm officially 5 minutes over time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's been a good day and a good stream as far as I'm concerned. I hope you enjoyed it. No, not depth tips, dev, D-E-V, D-E-E-V tips. If you are in the US store, you should be able to find it. Have a good one.